And today I am talking with Chef Lauren D'Agostino, and Chef Lauren helps veg-curious and plant-passionate people fall in love with plant-based food and living. Offering in-home catering services for intimate groups and wellness retreats, she infuses fun, familiarity, and high vibrations of love, joy, and gratitude, and often essential oils into her gourmet menus. When she's not in her kitchen cooking, she's in the virtual kitchen teaching self-conscious and intimidated cooks the plant-based fundamentals so that they can master the intuitive bliss of healthy and flavorful meals in the day-to-day living. A free-spirited and curious adventure seeker, astrology lover, intuitive yogi, high vibe community builder, and happiness junkie, Chef Lauren takes a holistic and fun-loving approach to plant-based living, both on and off the plate. So you're in for a great treat today with Chef Lauren. Well, Lauren, it is great to have you here. I'm curious. You're a very spiritual person from what I know about you, and let's start with your journey into veganism and plant-based eating. When did you start?
Yeah, great question. And I don't often share this with people, but I am feeling called to share kind of the first phase of veganism with you. So I actually went vegetarian and then vegan while I was in college. At the time, I was really into sustainability. I went to school out in Western Massachusetts, which is kind of like a notoriously kind of hippie vibe style place. And so I was finding myself really inspired by what I was learning, the different classes I could start to take. I took a green building class, a sustainability class, all sorts of stuff. And so the research that I started to do really inspired me to pursue a vegetarian lifestyle. I even was so bold as to source from, within 100-mile radius if I could, which, was kind of difficult, but it was a challenge that I was really excited to explore for myself. So I was vegetarian my junior year in college, I think. And then it was going so well, I thought, hey, I think I'll explore, a vegan summer. And so I did, but I also at the time was really into running. I just started to really lose a lot of weight. And so my parents were kind of like, what's going on with you? Is everything okay? And so they encouraged me to kind of get back onto a different path. But from everything I learned, I couldn't go back to how I was doing things before.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to, I was more responsible with where I was sourcing eggs. If I was eating those, I was more responsible about where I was then getting, because I did start to add animal protein back into my diet, I was more responsible with that. So that was kind of like a good first, exploration into veganism. And I explain that all to say that the first time I went vegan, I had the wrong approach. I wasn't connected with my spirituality yet. I wasn't connected with my bigger purpose for wanting to pursue a compassionate life. It just was kind of a personal challenge, I guess. And so the second time, fast forward, maybe 7 or 8 years or so, and I was working in pastry at the time. So, my diet was very imbalanced with tons of sugar, tons of coffee, and I just felt numb, emotionally, physically, spiritually numb. Like there was no sense of life kind of flowing through my veins. And I also was really disconnected to my work. As much as I loved cake decorating or used to and was really enjoying it, I knew that wasn't what I was meant to do. And so I started to pay attention to the people who I was working with, the people whose energy I really was gravitating towards. I didn't realize that's what it was at the time, but that's really what it was. I was drawn to the crystal bracelets they were wearing. I was drawn to the types of things that they would go do, the meditation practice, the yoga routine that they had. I was wondering why they smelled so good all the time. And so I started to notice that they all had a commonality, and that was that they were vegan. So when I was living in Florida is when I was kind of, learning all of this and observing all of this. And I was inspired again to look at exploring a vegan lifestyle for myself. It was something that when I was into it in college, I really connected with why someone might pursue that lifestyle, the animal ethics, the personal health, and the environmental impact. So this time around, I was really intentional in valuing all those three things still. But what I wanted to do was fall in love with the food. I wanted to empower myself. I wanted to really believe and feel like I knew what I was doing when I was in my kitchen, making my meals in the day to day. I wanted to really connect more deeply to my body fuel it in the way it desired to be fueled, to be connected more to seasonality, to really embrace my own inner wisdom, my own diet guru. And so the second time I went vegan, I was much more careful with the process, much more intentional, and really graceful too. So I knew where I was starting, eating mostly cake scraps and soggy French fries as byproducts of my food service jobs. And I knew I wanted to go fully vegan. And so I took about 3 or 4 months to get myself there. I knew it wouldn't happen overnight, or if it did, it wouldn't probably be sustainable. And I had learned from the first time that it was really important to do this in a healthy way.
Right.
So like I said, I fell in love with the food. I fell in love with the type of prep that I was doing. I fell in love with the community, and I allowed my brain and my body the chance to catch up to the intellect that was behind why someone would want to go vegan. So I really like fully embodied the reasons, right? So I didn't need willpower, right? And I try to work with people in that way to really connect with what your body wants to crave, because our bodies know what food we want to eat.
Absolutely.
But often the brain will try to play tricks on us. So anyway, to answer your question, that's kind of the full
Well,
story.
and it's so interesting because you talk about willpower, and a lot of people the first thing when somebody finds out you're vegan, their first response is, I could never do that. And it's like, well, I wasn't telling you to do it. It's like, or I could never give up cheese. And they seem to think that willpower does have something to do with it, when in reality, when you get into the core of what it means to be a vegan, because when I started my journey, I was a plant-based eater. I would not call myself vegan because I didn't want to be one of those crazy vegans. And now I'm a crazy vegan. And, and sometimes I have to kind of watch myself, because when let's say that there's a commercial on TV that has, a big juicy hamburger with bacon and cheese, and, and I'm just like so repulsed by that. And I have to be really careful not to be judgmental of other people's journey and their path. But, you said something that kind of reminded me when I was, I think I was about 12 or 14 years old. And this was back in the 60s. That was when Haight-Ashbury was just starting to be a big thing, and Janis Joplin was big, and Jimi Hendrix and all that. And I remember my dad drove the family to Haight-Ashbury, and he goes, girls, that's what you don't want to be. And I looked at that, and they were like dancing in the streets, and it was all the psychedelics and all that. And I thought, that's what I do want to be. It was the hippie days. But I went through my period of that. But you mentioned losing a lot of weight. How much weight did you lose by going plant-based vegan?
Yeah, I'm pretty petite to begin with. So for me, a healthy size is maybe like 115, maybe 120 in the winter months. So I was just barely over 100 pounds soaking wet. So I was thin, which for me, I am kind of naturally thin, but it was like something looked like a little sickly about me.
Right.
And so, part of me at that time in my life, I was not really fulfilled socially. I was really kind of in this awkward phase where, like many people in that age, right? Like I was disconnected from a life's purpose, or from really like knowing myself. And we have this term, right? Soul searching, but it's not really that you're searching because your soul is within. It's almost like a soul uncovering or a soul connection. So, I was kind of going through a lot of that. And so, I used my control about the food, and I used just kind of the escape of just being out on a run, not with friends or not with people who I thought were my friends, but maybe weren't really. So it just was kind of like the perfect storm of things that were kind of thrown out of balance, I guess.
Well, let's talk about the soul searching, because I think that, that's a very common term that people use. And you're right. Our soul is within, and it's really letting our soul reveal to us what the truth of who we are is. And yet right now, because of the pandemic, because of social distancing, because of a lot of confusion about, should I get the vaccine? Should I not get the vaccine? All of that stuff. And whatever people choose, that's their choice, quite seriously. But, how has being a vegan really helped you to tap into your soul purpose? And I know that you do retreats, and you're a yogi, you're an astrology lover. I mean, there's so much about you that is so woo-woo, if you will. And like people, in my family, they call me woo-woo and everybody else is woo. And so I'm curious, how does one let their soul unfold, and how does the vegan lifestyle help to enhance that?
Yeah, great question. And I love talking about this. So who knows what I'll ramble on into, but when I was working with a wonderful little cafe locally as their founding chef and kind of consultant chef, the two co-owners were very far along in their spiritual path. And so I'm so grateful for that time with them, because it really helped me to evolve spiritually in the ways that I was seeking. And so anyway, so at the end of my time with them, I realized kind of before retreat chefing landed in my lap, I realized that the gateway to spiritual ascension, the gateway to accessing all of the things that we seek Reiki for, or acupuncture or Chinese medicine, or right, like we choose those modalities because we're seeking something, or we're seeking a holistic healing or a deeper connection to source, God, creator, universe, whatever word you want to use, or we're seeking a deeper connection to ourselves. We can't do that if we're filled to the brim with processed fake food. We can't do that if we're filled with low vibrations from eating lots of animal products, food-like substances, that kind of thing. And so I realized that yoga was not just something that I practiced on the mat. It's a way that I am in life. And so that's compassion for other beings. That's compassion for other people. That's compassion for myself. And choosing the foods that will support my system, to its highest potential became my number one priority. People often say, they say lots of things to us, right? As vegans, or they kind of meet us and they learn that about us. And it's funny when they say, oh, I could never do that, or right, any of those things you mentioned. And honestly, I can't imagine living any other way. I just feel in the last couple of years, and especially through the pandemic, like I just feel like I'm on a different level. Like my emotional awareness is as high as it's ever been before, both in reading the room, on all of these different virtual connections and things, but also in kind of reading how my energy is in particular dynamics, right? Or just kind of holding that light for other people who maybe who haven't yet made those connections, or who haven't yet gone to explore what a more connected, more natural, more plant-based or vegan lifestyle, right? Whichever word you want to identify with, like they maybe haven't gotten there yet. So it was really important to me in the beginning of all of this, number one, to figure out how my work would evolve, but also who would I be as Lauren at the end of this? Like, how could I hold on to this light? How could I live my life and set an example for the people who know me, while also inspiring and celebrating and teaching others how they can start to add more plants into their life, whatever that looks like for them, whether that was one extra serving of kale to start with, or if they said, hey, I've really been watching you, or I've been seeing these videos, like I want to go vegan, I'm ready now. So, anywhere within that spectrum, but it was really important to me to kind of hold that vibration. I think that answered your question.
It did. And I definitely want to get into the whole topic of how energetically we can raise our vibration, and especially right now during the pandemic. And before we do that, I want to remind people, this is Kathleen Gage with Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. And I'm talking with Chef Lauren. And so we'll just stick with Chef Lauren. It's a little bit easier, but we'll put all of her contact information down below in the show notes. And during the pandemic, it's been so interesting to watch people in many ways give up their power. And, I really don't know if this is the most appropriate term, but they follow like sheep. It's like, okay, let's go and, go to the doctor. Let's go get our vaccine. Let's go do this. Instead of having a conscious awareness of what am I putting into my body that's either lowering or raising my vibration level and creating a healthier life. Because I recently went for my annual checkup and my doctor was like, you're the healthiest patient I have. She goes, this is so joyful to me. And she knows I'm plant-based and she fully supports it. And in the medical community in our area, we do have a lot of plant-based doctors, a lot of plant-based physician assistants and all of that. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts for somebody who really wants to take more control over their health and have more control over the whole issue of the pandemic? And it's not that we won't contract the COVID, but what happens after that really does make a difference with what we put in our body based on the animal products we put in our body. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can envision your meals, right? The food that you eat, you can imagine that like practice, and I'm not real big into sports, so it's even funny that I'll go and use this analogy, but a good sports team practices regularly, right? So our defense or immunity, think of that as your team. Those are the players on your team. Every time you eat or drink, you have the opportunity to help them practice. So by staying away from sugar, staying away from processed foods, staying away from these low vibe things that actually your immunity really doesn't work well with, helps them to be stronger, so that in the world, when you do come in contact, right, the big game, you do come in contact with those things, your defense is primed and ready to go and they can handle it no problem. If you are beating your system up with sugar, with low vibe foods, with processed foods, with foods that are inflammatory for you, like lots of people are eating gluten, it's really not working for them and they don't even know, or they're eating something else really inflammatory, peanuts, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not working for them. And so when they go out into the world, their system is weak because of the foods that they're eating, because of the toxins in their home that they're cleaning their house with, because of the toxins in the drinks that they're drinking. I mean, they're everywhere, right? So every time we eat or drink is an opportunity to either build our system up or tear our system down slowly over time. And so when you think of it that way, I mean, there's nothing more empowering than that, right? So by choosing high vibe living foods to help become part of you is how best you will, you'll kind of like increase your chances to fight against, all sorts of different things that will come across. I mean, from the common cold to, fill in the blank of anything that you might
Absolutely.
And certainly sometimes you'll get sick, sure, but I have found personally from using obviously the plants in my kitchen and then the plants kind of for my personal care and my natural wellness routine. If I do get sick, I don't get as sick.
Right.
So the symptoms are much more mild. And instead of being out straight for a week, maybe it's just a couple days or, take a half day off or something. So,
right.
I have found it to be invaluable to be on a plant-based diet, especially when it comes to, being faced with germs.
And you look at the comorbidity, the heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, and so much of that is preventable. And yet a lot of people will not recognize that. And what's really frustrating to me is how millions upon millions, if not billions of dollars are being put into putting a Band-Aid over the problem instead of let's get to the root of the problem, which is factory farming. When they shut down the factory farms, I know a lot of us were celebrating that because it's like, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. But immediately they got opened back up because there's money involved in it and there's lobbyists and all that. And it's so frustrating when the truth is right there in front of us and yet people choose to deny it. I mean, I could definitely get on my soapbox with that. But a great example, you use the sports analogy, Tom Brady. He's not full vegan. He's not 100% plant-based, but he said about 80% of his diet is plant-based. And he starts his morning with a plant-based drink. And it's got kale in it. It's got berries in it. It's got chia seeds, flax seeds. I saw this whole show on it. And you got to say, okay, there's something to be said for the oldest quarterback in the NFL who is the number one player of all time. And he eats a lot of plants. There's something to be said for that. So I think that people need to pay attention to that. But I'm curious with what you do in your work. Tell us about what you do in your business, who your ideal client is, and what you see happening as we move forward with the whole plant-based movement.
Yeah. For me, with my experience that I shared in the beginning and kind of the way that I personally came to my plant-based destination, which was to be fully vegan. Like I said, I knew where I was starting and where I wanted to go, and then I created the path to get there. So that's exactly the system that I use with people who want to go toward a plant-based diet. They don't have to go fully plant-based exclusive to work with me. I'd be all the more thrilled if that's where they want to go, but I recognize that we have to start somewhere, and you most of the time have to start with where you are, right? So just like, going on a road trip, getting from A to B, you need to know where you are, where you want to go, and then the different routes that you can take to get yourself there. So I work with people virtually. I call it a kitchen confidence coaching program. So for someone who wants to go plant-based, I like to say, you can want to go plant-based, but can you actually stay there, right? Is that a place you want to unpack your bags and live? And if so, we've got to pack accordingly. We've got to give you the skills and the tools and the resources and the confidence to actually live there and be happy there. A lot of people think that getting to a plant-based diet won't be delicious. It won't be easy. It'll be more expensive. All of that is not true, at least in the way that I'm doing it and the people who I'm helping. And so, I help them take whatever it is they're eating currently, wherever their point A is. We adapt it. We swap out ingredients. We make it accessible and with higher quality nutrients. And then they start there, or that maybe they're starting with a list of foods from, their naturopath or their functional medicine doctor. They're starting with a list of foods that they're encouraged to avoid. And then they go in their kitchen or they go to the store and like, whoa, wait a second. Like there's a lot of foods on here that I'm used to eating and I don't know what to do. So the person who's overwhelmed, confused, self-conscious, maybe they're flipping through their Instagram and they see all these vegan food porn photos and like, I could never make anything like that.
I love that. You've got veg-curious and vegan porn. I love that. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, because you have to be realistic and you have to have fun with it, right? Everyone is starting at a different place. Mm-hmm. My only mission is to get more plants on more plates and to have as much fun doing that as possible. And so I am so fortunate, and it's really a big priority for me, but so fortunate that I get to cheer people on in this process. And I think bringing that energy and bringing that perspective to it makes them feel better through that process, but it actually encourages them and it helps them to feel like it's something that they can do. And I think every vegan would agree, we certainly would want as many people to be part of that movement and part of that lifestyle, but even for people to move the needle to get to 50% better or to be 80% plant-based, wouldn't that be a huge, huge win? And so then again, kind of in letting their body and their brain catch up, they might be surprised that a few years down the road, they might be more inspired to be fully vegan, or they might be fully vegan a few days of the week. So, I like to keep all of the virtual seats open at my table, so to say, that all eaters are welcome. I will meet you where you are and we'll walk together down the plant-based path, however far you decide to go, whatever your definition of success is. Or if, we need to take a little break and you can kind of test out whatever destination or whatever kind of stopping point you're at, that's okay too. As I did before I gave up fully eggs and dairy, I needed at least a month or 6 weeks kind of to like be in vegetarian mode. Or when I was in college, I needed 9 months to live vegetarian before I was ready to move to being vegan. So that same kind of compassionate and graceful approach is really what people appreciate, I think, in working with me. So it's a couple different things. The kitchen confidence coaching program is definitely the most popular. It gives people the most support in the shortest amount of time. Usually 3 months is what people need. Welcome to go beyond that, definitely, but it's a combination of virtual cooking classes. I've got a virtual course, a couple of them that I finished up recently on Teachable, so that it's all self-paced videos, me in the kitchen talking through the process of the meals I'm creating in the day-to-day, embracing the process of batch cooking, having all the right pantry ingredients on hand, just making it easy. You shouldn't have to go and cook every time you're hungry to eat.
Absolutely. I love the batch cooking. I think that's great. And I want to remind people, this is Kathleen Gage with Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. And I'm talking with Chef Lauren. And Chef Lauren, how do people get in touch with you? What's the fastest way to have access to all your information?
Yeah, good question. They can visit laurendagostino.com, and there's tons of things on there. You can find me on Teachable as well, but every single program and all the different things are on my website. I offer part coaching and also part experience. So you mentioned the retreat kind of thing, right? So for the person who is looking at hosting a wellness retreat, or a vegan leader, perhaps vegan business leader who is looking to host a retreat experience, I'm a great fit for those folks. So you can find
Wonderful.
on my site. I am on social media too, at Chef Lauren D'Agostino, kind of sharing some different food philosophy videos. And people often ask, oh, can I find a recipe for this thing or that thing? I'm kind of the unrecipe chef. So I always found that to be too restricting, too structured. I can kind of operate within that framework, but I much prefer to wing it and let Mother Nature be my guide. So that's what you'll find on my site and in working with me. And it's so much fun and so creative, and really connected, really intuitive. Yeah.
It's funny because my mother-in-law, I love my crock pot, and I cook all these different recipes in my crock pot. And she goes, what's the recipe for this? I go, I haven't got a clue. She goes, well, how did you come up with it? I said, I just downloaded it. It was just like, I thought, okay, well, let's try this and this and this. And I think in the 2.5 years since I've gone plant-based, only once did I have a bad meal. It just didn't work out. But every other time, and she's my greatest enthusiast. So she applauds me and she eats it. And it's like, okay, keep doing that and I'll keep cooking. But I'm curious, I want to veer off to the left here with something about the whole food issue with food insecurities and food deserts. A lot of people, they say, well, I would go vegan, but it's so expensive. Let's shatter that myth right now. And let's talk about those people who are on a very, very limited income that really do want to eat healthier. Because when you look at it, if a child is being raised on processed food and they're moving into the fat and then obese category, which more and more every day we have children that are becoming obese, that impacts their ability to study, that impacts their ability to socialize, all of that. Let's talk about what can be done within lower income families to have a healthy way of eating. And it doesn't cost more, it actually costs less than what their current grocery bill might be.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you think about it, the most expensive products come from the meat counter or the fish counter, right? So beans should be your new best friend. It's so affordable to buy beans, right? I mean, beans and rice are two staple foods in a lot of developing countries, just in a lot of, countries across the world, for good reason, because they're affordable, they're accessible, and they're really versatile. So swapping some of your protein, right, from meat to maybe choose beans, or there's protein in leafy greens, there's protein in some fruits and vegetables. I mean, we get protein in so many other places besides animal meat, and it's not so much the amount of protein as it is the vehicle in which it's delivered, right? So choosing a lighter, cleaner protein will be more friendly to your wallet, but also to your body. But what I would say about the kind of the low income and the food scarcity issue is processed foods don't fill our bodies up in the same way that whole natural foods do. So a lot of people say, oh, well, we eat a lot of food, or like people with growing kids often say, oh my gosh, they eat so much food. Well, yes, because the food that they're getting, namely processed food, isn't filling them up with calories that their body can actually use and be satiated by. That's why they need to eat so much food. And then in the case of children and kids especially, that's why often you see that huge dip into obesity, because they're eating endless amounts of calories and sugar and just like things that their body doesn't know how to process or use fully as fuel. So it gets stored as fat. So switching to fruits and vegetables, you'll notice that perhaps you're eating less food because your body is actually filling up on that food, right? Your stomach has two different receptors, one for stretch or size and one for depth of nutrition. Like you could eat a whole box of Fruit Loops probably in one sitting, or you could eat, have you ever eaten 2 apples at one time? No, you can only eat one because you get full, because fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, and legumes, they deliver with them tons of nutrients, but also fiber and water and all like things that our body just goes bananas for.
No pun intended, but it goes bananas for.
Exactly. Maybe it wasn't intended. I don't know. But when we eat processed foods or fake foods, what you're getting is nothing, is dry. just look at it, maybe study it. Like if you're curious, if you have some, you're listening now and you have some processed food or crackers, or you have like something in your pantry, take it out and look at it. Does it look like food to you? Is it vibrant? Is it colorful? And this might be because I'm pretty far kind of down the woo-woo road, I think, but like processed food just like doesn't resonate with me.
Right.
But real fruits and vegetables and things that I know were grown outside in nature, that resonates. It's almost like you can feel the vibration. And I'm kind of tapped out down this road a little bit, but kind of coming back to what people can do in kind of the low income situation is start to shift in to get closer to nature if you can. So instead of purchasing like a hamburger helper meal box kind of thing, can you simply purchase the spices? Can you add your own salt?
Yes.
Can you, you're not reaching for ground meat, maybe you're reaching for beans, and then, you're just buying like rice in bulk or something like that, right? Like, I think with what happens, my suspicion, I don't know this for sure because I've not had to live in this circumstance, but when you're given, or when you get to shop with food stamps, you go to the lower priced things, right? You try to make a meal from, you make as many meals as you can in a convenient way, right? That's why a lot of those boxed meals are so successful.
Right.
So if you can really just kind of dismantle that to say, okay, well, how can I start to like get back some control? How can I start to reduce all this extra sodium, all these extra preservatives, all this like extra stuff that you don't need? How can you bring it back one step closer to nature? And then just keep doing that. So maybe like, tomatoes aren't fully accessible all year round. I get that. Okay. Is there a good tomato sauce that you can find instead? Right. Maybe fruit too is not accessible all the year round. Well, instead of purchasing those little fruit cups that come in syrup, can you find fruit in water, or can you just get frozen fruit and can you add water and make smoothies? Right. So like, think about what you might be using, or what, someone, or these different programs that are run, right? How can you just shift, like even one or two clicks, or move the needle just a little bit to get closer to what your body actually will love?
Absolutely. And to realize that food manufacturers really aren't looking out for our best interest. They're looking out for our money. They want our money. And that's, the reality, because years ago, there were ad campaigns around Coca-Cola when it had cocaine in it. And it's like, this is what you need to live a healthy life. And doctors supported smoking years ago. I mean, there's ads from the 50s, print ads that you can find online that are shocking. And when you really pull back the covers and you look at what the motivation with the food manufacturers really is, it's about us spending money with them. It's about getting people hooked, because there's also what's called the bliss factor and the bliss point, where food manufacturers actually, they have scientists that every day they're working on that one thing that will get us addicted to food, because sugar is more addicting than cocaine. Salt, the fats, it's like there's a book called Salt, Sugar, Fat, I believe. And I'm trying to think of the name of the author. Phenomenal book. And speaking of books, what would you recommend if somebody is just getting started and they really want to go into this way of life? Because what I love is when somebody comes to me and they say, oh, I just had a vegan meal, or they'll buy something and it's processed vegan and they go, look what I bought. And it's like, well, good. I'm glad, you're moving in the right direction. And I don't want to say, oh, well, that's not really that healthy. It's like, good for you. And let's, talk a little bit more about what the next healthy choice would be. But what are some books that you've read that you could recommend, or documentaries, or anything that you can recommend as a resource for people to really get on the path?
Yeah, great question. The first book I ever read back in college was called The Kind Diet by Alicia Silverstone. So I loved that. I always loved reading the beginning part of a cookbook. And then I would read through, even as a kid, I would read through the recipes start to finish. And like by the end, my mouth would be watering. But I just loved reading how food came together. So that was one that I really enjoyed the entirety of the book. The Forks Over Knives brand is fantastic. So anything by them. Rich Roll and Julie Pyatt also have a couple of great cookbooks. That are really-
I want to stop you there because you're the second person today today is my day of recording my interviews, and you're the second person who mentioned Rich Roll. And Rich was one of the first people that I actually became a fan of, and I read his book, Finding Ultra, and I'm a runner, very slow runner. I always hold the distinction of being the last one in on a marathon. I mean, that's my claim to fame, is I'm always the last one in. But, in my 60s, not a bad thing. But I read his book and I love Rich Roll. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I get so excited when people mention his name because he's been such a big influence in the movement. So who else?
Yeah. I had the privilege back when I was working for Whole Foods Market to attend a wellness retreat run by the Esselstyn family, the folks behind Engine Food. Yeah. So, I mean, I learned a ton in that week-long experience with them, both from the lifestyle side, but also a peek into like the professional side. Like, wait a minute, like what they're doing is really, it looks like a lot of fun. I love teaching people. I love helping people to make shifts and to have information click. So anyway, I just totally fell in love with their fun approach. They're the folks, for those who don't know, who are doing the whole food, plant-based, no oil. So, in learning from them, I appreciated the science behind why someone might prioritize no oil. But in my practical application of that, once I got home, I found that it wasn't completely necessary for the conditions health-wise that I was working within, or rather that I wasn't working with. But certainly I've scaled back my use of oil and my consumption of any added oils and things. But those people are fantastic. They've got a number of books, again, that really focus on plant strong. I think that's kind of their term that they coined. And really just they're folks also who really celebrate whole foods, and they don't try to make food something it's not. Right. They really celebrate the entire plant, and I appreciate that. So those are some things books wise that I loved. I also really love that I got into recently more, that I got down the spiritual road. Medical Medium has a couple of really interesting books. Life-Changing Food, I think it's called. Anthony, I forget his last name. But that's fantastic. He talks about the different spiritual benefits and emotional benefits that different foods bring us. Like grapes, for example, are really great, as it turns out, for depression. So
Interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Or blueberries, because the blueberry bush withstands the cold winters up in Maine and New England. And so blueberries are very resilient. And so they kind of bring that energy to our human body when we consume them. So it's just filled with all sorts of like really kind of esoteric, philosophical types of things about food, which I really love to get into. And then kind of on the documentary side, I have seen them all and I love them all. But what's really cool about what I love to do and kind of the way that I like to share information with people is I love to learn more about them and what they'll resonate with. So some people, they know kind of on the fringe that, confined animal feedlots are awful places, but they don't necessarily want to see it. So maybe that person won't benefit from seeing a movie that really shows that, but they'll benefit and resonate more with something that takes more a health approach. So like What the Health is a great example.
Right.
Or trying to think of another one that's kind of Forks Over Knives, another one too. And similarly, someone who doesn't really resonate so much on the health, but would really, really go all in if they watched Conspiracy, or they really care, like, they want to watch one of the environmental ones like Plastic Ocean, or even just from like an animal lover perspective, and you watch Blackfish, right? Like that, especially when you think about just the vegan lifestyle as a whole, there's so much to it. It's more than just the food. It's really the lifestyle. It's the difference between pets and animals. And then it's being curious to go and see what the entirety of that looks like, and kind of our human role in that whole relationship.
Well, and it's really, it's kind of like the layers of an onion that keep peeling away, where you go deeper and deeper and deeper into it. Because when I started because of inflammation. I was 64 at the time, had really severe inflammation. And as a writer, it was impeding my ability to write. And so I did some research, and I thought, okay, I'll give it 7 days and see if getting rid of meat and dairy will make a difference. And what is so ironic is I was working quite a bit in the pet industry at that time. I was a keynote speaker at conferences, and that's kind of like a thing of the past because of physical conferences. We don't do them right now, but as I started, and within a week, I think I dropped like 7 pounds. I've dropped about 38 pounds since I went vegan. And it's amazing because I don't have to watch what I'm eating anymore. And I'm one of the no oil people. I got rid of oil right away, did the no SOS, no added salt, no added sugar, no added oil. And it's so amazing because then you start looking at the environment, then you start looking at the factory farming, then you start looking at just the overall lifestyle. And that's truly where you know that you've crossed that invisible line, is when you say, this is my lifestyle. And when people say, oh, I'm not doing that vegan diet anymore, it wasn't a vegan diet that you were doing, because truly being a vegan means that you are doing it for the ethics, you're doing it for the spiritual side, you're doing it for the animals. And I love your connection to the spiritual side of things, because when you really get into a meditation, for example, and you start thinking about where the animal products originated from, and that these animals were brought on earth as a direct result of somebody's palate and the selfishness of somebody wanting the flavor. And you can get equally great flavor, if not better, by being a vegan. I did a tofu bacon the other day, and I sliced the tofu really thin. I put some liquid aminos on it. I baked it, and a few people tried it and they're like, gosh, this tastes better than bacon. It's like, and it's so much healthier. So in closing, Chef Lauren, I've been talking with Chef Lauren of, give us your web address again. And if you could spell it out for those people who will be listening to this.
Sure. It's laurendagostino.com. LAUREN. D'Agostino is DAGOSTINO.com.
Okay. And I call her Chef Lauren, and you're a runner. Am I correct on that?
I did back in college a little bit,
Okay.
kind of off and on. I have a cousin who's a professional runner, actually.
Wow.
So running. Yeah.
Okay. And in closing, what are your final thoughts for people who are kind of sitting on the fence and they're thinking, maybe I'd like to try this? What would be 2 or 3 easy steps for them to move forward? And then just give us your final thoughts.
Yeah. Some easy things to do in the beginning. Definitely focus on what you can add to your plate versus focusing on what you're taking off of it. So adding in more color, adding in more variety, making your meat or your egg or your animal product portions smaller. So when I was, kind of starting to question everything, I said, I'm making a sandwich and I'll just automatically put cheese on it, but do I really need to? Does it need to be there? Can I even taste it? Most of the time the answer was no. So just kind of noticing what are some baby steps that you can take? Can you, instead of choosing cookies after lunch, can you have a piece of fruit instead of some extra sugary drinks or vitamin water, Powerade, not to pick on those brands, but can you drink water instead with some fresh citrus juice in it or something? How can you look at every single thing that you're eating and ask yourself, is this worth it? Is this worth potentially, or most likely, kind of poisoning your body now, slowly over time? Is it worth it? I would argue that it's not, that your body and your long-term health is certainly worth making these different shifts in the short term, and also to be patient, right? I mean, you touched on the bliss point. It takes a little bit of detox depending on what kinds of things you've been eating in your diet. So be aware of that it might be very challenging and very uncomfortable in the beginning, but it's because your taste buds and your brain are so conditioned to crave that, and it's by design. So I don't want to compare it to detox from something that's much more serious, but some of the things we eat, sugar and salt specifically, they can be very addictive. Food
Absolutely.
addiction is a real thing that people struggle with. So, finding grace and compassion, and just making each meal, making the best choice that you can, and knowing that if you slip up or you make a choice that's less than desirable or less than, what ultimately fits in your perfect lifestyle, when you envision that, whatever that is, if you make an off choice in the present moment, just understand and realize that a couple hours later, when you go to eat your next meal, you have a choice to make a better decision, a choice to try again. And so there is no all or nothing. There is no labeling, really, as far as I'm concerned. It's how can you do the best in the present moment? How can you honor your natural cravings? How can you honor your activity level, your stress level, your emotions? And how can you share that with others? Can you gather
Nice.
around the table with conversation? Can you be more present to your food? Can you show more gratitude for the journey that the food has taken to make its way to your plate, even for yourself, hopefully for yourself too, as you're cooking with your own two hands in your kitchen? That's the most, food and cooking is the most accessible form of self-care that I can possibly think of, because we
Right.
all have multiple opportunities every single day to show our bodies that we love them, to help our bodies do what they do best in keeping us alive and thriving, not just surviving, but ultimately creating and really building this fortress of a machine that we are equipped to go and do life in, to do the thing that we're here to do, to spread the message we're here to spread and love the people that we're here to love. So yeah, food is just kind of the medium of choice, I guess. But really, I think what it is I'm up to is much more layered than that. It's empowerment, it's transformation, it's compassion, it's grace, and connection with ourselves and with this beautiful host planet that we call home.
I love it. I love it. And, that was so well said, because it really is about giving thanks for our food. It's a spiritual experience to create food that will nourish our body, and to know that we're doing it in a very cruelty-free way, and that we connect on a deeper level with the animals. I really believe that my relationship with animals now is very different than it was when I was consuming animals. And even though I've done animal rescue for years, I mean, every animal that we have on our property, we've got horses, chickens. We're getting 2 more chickens today, as a matter of fact, that are rescues, dogs, a cat, and we've had many animals over the years. And my relationship with the animals now is very different. So thank you so much, Chef Lauren. It's been delightful. We'll make sure to put all your contact information in the show notes. I encourage people, check out Chef Lauren's website, check out all the social media. And if you want a virtual meeting with her, she will set it up so that you can actually learn how to consume foods that are healthier for you. They're more conscious, and they will give you a deeper spiritual connection. So with that, thank you, everybody. This is Kathleen Gage with Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show. Have a great day and live healthy.
Thank you for your commitment to an ethical life through plant-based food choices. The kind of choices that are kind to your body, the environment, and most of all, animals. Be sure to leave a review and rating of the Plant-Based Eating for Health podcast show.